Hello everybody, it's Justin from Shock Therapy again, and we are really excited to give you an unboxing of the 2018 Textron Wildcat XX. There's been a lot of hype about this Wildcat, and we've seen it as well as you. There's a really good possibility that this car will be the breakout car for Textron and place it solidly in the market. So let's take a look at some of these components that are making this car so great. So coming to the front of this car, the first thing you're going to notice is the visual. The body on the car has an excellent design, but the most important things that have been changed on this car are underneath the body, and that's really what concerns us the most. We want to see what's going to last the longest, what's going to work the best, because if you're ever going to race it or push it hard, that's the first thing you should be concerned with. Removing all the ball joints in previous designs. This is a double sheared front end that uses all uniball construction, which is exactly the same thing that we're running in all the race cars. Strength in these parts really just translate to longevity. You can run the car a lot harder. For instance, typical things that wear out in previous cars are going to be control arm bushing hardware on this car, huge bushings, 12mm hardware, substantially welded tabs on the chassis holding all of these components in place. So you're not going to see things wear out nearly as fast as previous years, previous models, or even previous cars made by other people. Another item that's on the front end of this car with respect to geometry is the shock positioning is stood up in a much more vertical position. This helps because as the suspension compresses, perfect geometry when it comes to shock positioning is shock at a 90-degree angle to the lower control arm as it's compressed. This gives the shock the most leverage to the system, and from a shock guy standpoint, it allows us to make the car work the best it possibly can, the plushest in the little stuff and the stiffest in the big stuff. So geometry on that, amazing. Another really cool item with the front end design on this car is a good portion of the parts can be interchanged from left to right. So in the rear, trailing arms can be swapped from left to right. In the front, upper arms can swap out left to right. This means that from a race team standpoint, you can carry less spares. Only one of each do you have to carry. You don't have to carry a full set of suspension on the car. Other things that are interchangeable, hub bearings, calipers, caliper bracketry, and rotors. All of these things you can carry one and it'll interchange all the way around this whole car. So looking at how things have been designed, it is obvious that Textron listened to Robbie Gordon and the racers when it came to designing this car, because things are easier to be raced, easier to be replaced, and the design work is actually accurate from a geometry standpoint. So the tires that come on this car are a 30-inch tall tire, 10 inches wide, on a factory 15-inch wheel. But one of the cool things about that is that all the wheels and tires are exactly the same on this car. So that means that one spare tire fits all four corners as opposed to different size wheels, and you have to decide what you're going to carry for spare and where it's going to be. But that's the obvious thing that you can tell by looking at this. Some of the biggest items, or one of the biggest items that is not so obvious, is the front differential in this car. Normally in a side-by-side, the tires all spin at exactly the same speed, same gear ratio front to rear. In this car, the front differential is actually a higher sped rate, so the ring and pinion and overall gear ratio is a little bit faster. So as you're driving in the dirt, these front tires are spinning slightly faster than the rear tires are. How does that help? Well, when you enter in a corner and you floor it, or if you go over a bump and you floor it, the front tires are naturally going to want to pull you straight. So a little bit more stability, certainly staying on the trail a lot easier, and a lot less of that sideways counter-steery feel because the front tires are actually pulling you forward. So if you come to the back of the car, you're going to see something that no stock UTV has, and that's a purpose-built trunk area. This trunk will fit a 32-inch tire. It also has factory mounting in the center so that you could drop the tire into the trunk, you could run a T-handle mount, and you're done. This has a tire mount built in. It also has some substantial tie downs, so you can hold a ton of gear in the back of this without having to buy some sort of mechanism to make it work. Furthermore, this trunk is quick release. You can get this out of your way to have full access to the motor and upper end of the transmission in less than 10 seconds, making it very easy to service this car. So other items in the back of the car that are definitely worth mentioning, and actually maybe the most important in this car, would be rear suspension design, axles, trailing arms, and engine power plant. So the first things that we've mentioned before would be trailing arms. They're actually identical left to right, so you only have to carry one spare. Second, trailing arms on this car have 2 mounts in the front and no need for radius rods in the back. So that means no radius rods to bend, and a little bit stronger system by having everything in the trailing arm mounting. One thing that this requires is a telescoping axle, because a trailing arm system creates a longer plunge axle system than a normal radius rod design does. So these axles that are on the car are fairly revolutionary in that they extend like a telescoping system to give the exact axle length that's needed wherever the travel might be. Another item about these rear axles that a lot of people will really appreciate is that the way that they install into the transmission or the front differential isn't the standard style circlip that is depressed and installed, clip and held in place. Those systems can be easily pulled out when you're driving the car. Sometimes they even stick and you can't get the axle out of the car. So from a standpoint of serviceability, this system installs with a positive lock and it will not pull out under normal use. The only way that it can come out is by the CV system being pushed in further, which releases the clip, and then you can pull it out. So that does 2 things. One, it makes it so that you can get the axle out when you want to service the car every single time without it being stuck, and it keeps the axle from pulling out under normal use. Some of the other items in the back of the car that definitely we need to mention would be the power plant. Now, it's a Yamaha engine that's in the car, and it's very similar to what comes in the YXZ, although it has different ECU and different camshafts, and the capabilities of it are much higher. At least we all know that the engine that's in this car has time on it, has history on it, and we know that it's reliable. One of the negatives, though, is that it's normally aspirated in the 110-120 horsepower range, and that might not be enough horsepower for this car when we really want to run it hard. The good news is, though, that there are turbo and supercharged kits available for it, and they will be available from the factory very soon. The Yamaha guys in YXZs are routinely making 300 to 400 horsepower out of these, so you know that at least you could do that in this car if you ever wanted to. Now, I personally have ridden in the prototype of this car with Robbie Gordon at the Dunes New Year's Eve about 2 years ago, and that was a 200 horsepower car. Trust me, it has plenty of power at that level to do anything you wanted in the dunes, and usually the dunes are where it robs power. So the capabilities are there, they're right around the corner, it won't have to wait very long. Another really cool thing that's put into this car is the heat shielding around the engine and transmission area. Now, a lot of UTV models have had fire issues. I personally have experienced this, but one of the things that we've always seen is the possibility of the plastic around the engine and transmission compartment melting and having a fire that you can't put out. Well, the heat shield that's in this car is quite extensive. It is definitely going to do the job of stopping any of those items ever happening again. So another incredible feature that the Wildcat has is a factory alternator on the engine. Now, standard UTV has a stator. Stators are small and packaged in tight, confined areas inside the engine. It's very hard to wind those up or rewind them to get more power. The cars are always searching for more power as soon as you put lights on it, accessories, more fans, clean air systems. They're never running enough power to kind of keep the thing charged. So an alternator is an amazing step. It has a lot of power, and you can also rewind it if you needed more. This is a pretty standard issue for all the race cars, and they clearly listen to all the race guys. Another design feature in the car is that the motor and trans in the back are mounted from above and hung. That means that they're not bolted to the cage assembly from underneath like a standard UTV. 2 things that are helpful with this. One, if you bottom the car out heavily, you don't smash the cage into the engine and move the motor mounts. 2, they've also allowed this system to unbolt from the car by 4 bolts. So the whole rear cage and skid plate assembly can be removed from the car, and you can work on the motor and trans with nothing in your way. That's an incredible feature that allows you to work, service, and make things easy on the car. Another item that's very well thought out on the car, and everybody will understand this if you've ever lost a belt on your UTV, is that the clutch cover on this system is not bolted on with 15 or 20 bolts that are hard to do and time consuming. It's got quick release clamps that just snap loose, the whole cover comes off, you can change the belt quickly and pop it back on. Race guy inspired, everybody using their car will really appreciate that. So a couple of the features on the interior of this car. Number 1, room. I'm 6'2", 240 pounds. I've got plenty of room inside. I can sit all the way back, easily control it. It's got room above my head, which is usually not the case, especially with a helmet. It's got plenty above. Another item about the interior is that everything is already set up for all the accessories that you want to add to the car. So for us, since we're going to be testing in the Baja in about 2 days, we've already installed a Lawrence GPS, full intercom and radio system. All the plugs are ready to go. Basically plug and play, fused, switches are easily installed and added anywhere you want. There's already places on the dash for you to add extra switches and other accessories. Took us just a couple of hours, and having that pre-done is just a really nice way that they thought things out and make life easy on us. A few other nice things about the interior in this car are how other items are ready to go. So if you wanted to add a 5-point seatbelt harness system in the car, slots are already cut into the firewall, and there's a seatbelt tube ready to go for a loop system. You don't have to add anything, you just simply put the seatbelts in. Doors on the car are very nice. Fit and finish is excellent. The hinge is huge. There's no rattling in the door, and there's 2 different levers you can use, one to get in and one to get out. You don't have to reach inside the door to open the system up. A little bit bulky and awkward. You do it from the outside of the car, and to get out of the car once you're in, it's an easy latch and a tight fit. One safety feature about the interior is the cage design. Most UTVs don't have any X bracing in the cage. They keep it very simple, but when you're in a rollover, especially at high speed and in races, and you can roll the car sideways, the cage hits the ground from the side. Cages have a tendency of folding over. This car has factory X bracing in the rear and factory X bracing in the front, and in Baja we call those cow bars. It keeps the cows out of the car if you hit one. Those systems are super important, and it makes this car much more safe than any normal cage would be. So we've said it before, but we're going to say it again. This car, after looking at all of the individual items on it, is clearly the closest thing to a race car that you can buy stock in the UTV industry. It is obvious that Textron is listening to racers. Robbie Gordon had a ton of influence in it. It is absolutely clear to us by picking apart little things on this car that that is the case. So where we feel this car is going to fit into the marketplace, it's perfect for the person that wants to run their car hard, possibly even race pace at a consistent rate without having to touch it. It already comes with all the items that we normally would have to upgrade on a side-by-side. Another place that this is going to fit is the person who wants to go racing. They have the least amount to do to this car to actually go and compete. How does that all work out for the person who is not going to run that hard? That means that this car has the structure and design, accessories, and things available for the average everyday person to run anytime, anywhere, and not have to worry about it wearing out, not have to worry about it coming apart or any parts failing. Factory alternator, front end geometry, double shear on all bolting and hardware components, trailing arm with telescoping axles, removable rear cage for accessibility, components that actually can work from left to right, front to back without having to buy multiple sets. All of these items are going to help everyone who is owning this car, not just the race teams, although it's race inspired, that is obvious. All of these items have never been done or come available on a stock UTV right off the showroom floor before. So now that we've got all the boring stuff out of the way by looking at all the details on the car, we're excited to go to the next step, and that's testing. So the way we're going to test this car, we're taking it immediately, and I mean immediately tomorrow, to the Baja 500, and we're going to pre-run the whole course twice. So when we come back and you see us again, this car is going to have over 1,000 miles on it in Baja, Mexico at race pace. We're going to know what it does well. We're going to know what it doesn't do well. We're going to find out what we want to improve, maybe the things that don't need improving, and we'll let you know. So if you're interested in getting your hands on a new Textron Wildcat XX, contact Sholo Motorsports if you're local in Arizona. They have a no-hassle policy, family atmosphere, and they're great people to deal with. If you're out of state, go to textronoffroad.com and look up a dealer near you. So stay tuned for the next episode in this series. We're going to give you a complete lowdown on the performance of this car the minute we get back from Baja and at least 1,000 miles on it. We'll let you know exactly what it does well and what it doesn't. We'll also let you know what we plan on making for this car to improve the items that might need it.